I filed for divorce. A poor wife is useless after all. My husband suddenly shocked me with these words. Moreover, while I was away on a business trip, not only did he file for divorce, but he also married his lover. Furthermore, my husband said, "You, a poor person, married me for my wealth, right? I won't fall for that, so give up any claim to the property." As if I married him for his money. When I confronted my indifferent husband, who had always treated me like a poor person and scorned me since our marriage, he started to unravel. Ultimately, he spiraled down to rock bottom. My name is Karen, 35 years old. My father passed away when I was in kindergarten, and since then, my mother raised me and my sister by herself. I was grateful to my mother, but deep down, I always wished I had a father. Of course, I didn't necessarily want a new father, but I always dreamed of living happily ever after with my husband, surrounded by children, though I didn't know how many we'd have. Life on just my mother's earnings was far from wealthy, but we were happy as a family of 3. However, the poverty I grew up with never left me, even after I started working and earning a decent salary. Even when I was single, my grocery shopping at the supermarket centered around discounted items, and I would stock up during sales if the items wouldn't go bad. Eating out was out of the question, and for meals alone, I wouldn't even buy convenience store bento. For drinks, I would bring tea in a thermos. Before I knew it, saving money had become like a hobby of mine. I married my husband, John, 4 years ago. We met through an acquaintance and hit it off. Unlike me, who grew up poor, John was wealthy from a young age, and our views on money and values were completely different. However, I was drawn to his kindness and the new world he showed me. We started dating soon after meeting, and as I was over 30 and eager to get married, we tied the knot in less than a year. We decided to move into my apartment, which was close to both our workplaces. It was a company-subsidized apartment, so the rent was quite cheap, one of the reasons we chose it as our new home. After marriage, I continued paying the rent, and John contributed to other living expenses. This was how our married life began. John had a somewhat traditional view of gender roles, believing women should quit their jobs and take care of the home after marriage, and that men should support women while women manage the household. I found these views of him cool and masculine at the time. Before our marriage, he suggested I become a homemaker, saying he would support me. He probably thought of me as a domestic woman, good at cooking and cleaning, which made me happy at that moment. However, I loved my job and had important responsibilities at work. I didn't hate household chores, but being a full-time homemaker wasn't an option for me. If I quit my job and became a homemaker, we would have to leave this apartment as it's company subsidized. Moving to a similar apartment would significantly increase our rent and moving costs. Honestly, John's salary wasn't that high. If we had children, our financial needs would increase, and I would inevitably need to keep working. Thinking about our situation, I decided to earn as much as I could while I could, and since I was paying the rent, I felt I needed to continue earning. I subtly brought up these points, including the need to move out of the apartment, in a conversation with my husband, John. This was probably the first time I contradicted his opinions. "Hey, about you wanting me to be a homemaker. I'll take care of the house, but can I continue working until we have kids? I want to save as much money as we can for now." "Huh? Are you saying my salary isn't enough, or do you just want more money to spend?" "It's not like that. Kids are expensive, and I want to save up for that. I can even use my earnings for our living expenses. It's better to have more money, right?" "Right. Your annual income is $15,000, right? It's not much, just enough for the rent, but it's better than nothing. It's better than lounging around at home." "All right, but don't slack off on the housework." "Thank you. I'll keep working until we have kids. Of course, I'll take care of the house too." Though I felt uneasy about some parts, I managed to convince him to let me keep working. but in hindsight, this might have upset him. Balancing work and household chores was harder than I expected. My days were incredibly busy. I was a full-time employee, not part-time. I woke up early to prepare breakfast, lunch boxes for both of us, do some prep for dinner, and tidy up the house. When I got home, I prepared dinner, heated the bath, and did laundry after John went to sleep. Honestly, there was barely any time for us as a couple, and I began to wonder if this was really what a marriage should be like. On the other hand, John, who acted like a traditional husband, did absolutely nothing at home. He must have seen how busy I was with household chores, but he would just eat dinner, drink beer, and relax when he got home. He'd bathe alone as soon as it was ready, then go to his room. I wished he would help out a bit, given how hard I was working, but I couldn't say anything, fearing he'd tell me to just quit my job. Despite his lack of help at home, I naively hoped he would change once we had kids. However, our relationship had grown distant, making the prospect of having children unlikely. I decided to discuss it with John. "Hey, we should start thinking about having kids, right?" "Huh, kids? You're quite energetic considering you're tired from work and chores." "It's not about that. I want to have children." "We haven't been married that long. Isn't it too early for kids?" "Maybe for you, but I'm already over 30. Women have a limited time to have children. It's getting harder to conceive as I get older. It's almost too late." "Then we don't need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help, right? You know I'm busy with work. I won't help with child rearing." "What?" "Declaring you won't help with child rearing even before they're born is strange, isn't it? I plan to raise them alone, but shouldn't you at least have the intention to help? It's your child too." "Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just complain that I don't help, and that you're doing it alone, making me the bad guy. You must have been indoctrinated with poverty and lots of kids since birth. We're not poor. We don't need kids." End of discussion. John abruptly ended the conversation and went to his room, leaving me standing alone in the living room. I was overwhelmed by tears. Not only was my wish for children rejected, but also my upbringing was mocked. Following this incident, our relationship deteriorated rapidly, and we hardly spoke anymore. There were no children and barely any communication. Maybe it was time to consider divorce. Yet, a faint image of my once kind husband lingered in my mind, making me wish we could return to the happy couple we used to be. Since then, I tirelessly juggled work and home responsibilities. I was incredibly busy with various tasks. Eventually, I took on a significant project at work, which meant more business trips and further distance from John. One day, as usual, I told him about an upcoming business trip, but his reaction was unlike any other time. "I'll be away on a business trip for about 10 days from tomorrow. Please take care," I said. "Another trip? You're always working hard. Take care, even though you must be tired," he replied, unexpectedly kind. Unlike his usual mocking self, he even said with a smile, "Wait for a big surprise when you get back." I had given up on him and was resolved to a decision internally. However, his smile shook my resolve. Our wedding anniversary was approaching, and I thought maybe he had a surprise for that. Despite everything, I hoped he might have changed his heart. I even considered rethinking my stance if he had truly changed. However, my faint hope was shattered by a major incident. When I returned home 10 days later, I faced the first surprise. The front door wouldn't open. The key didn't fit. As I struggled, John spoke from inside. "Karen, right? Surprised? This is the first surprise. I changed the lock so your key won't work anymore." "What do you mean? Why doesn't my key work? Open the door." "Why would I let a stranger into my house?" "I changed the locks, and for your information, we're divorced. That's the second surprise. A poor wife is useless." "Divorce? I never signed any papers. How could you even do this? I just forged your signature. I submitted it with a friend's name as a witness, so you're a stranger now. Got it? Then we need to discuss property division, right? Right. Property division. I have a document for you to sign. I'll let you in this one last time. John finally opened the door. Inside, there was a document for me to sign, waiving my rights to property division. I thought you'd say, give me property division if you want a divorce. Poor people like you probably saw me as rich. You married me for my wealth, right? I won't fall for that, so waive your rights to the property. What? I never even thought about property division. I hadn't even considered divorce. So you'll also waive your rights to property division, right? How much property do you think a poor person like you has? A few thousand in savings at most. I don't need that. I have more assets, so if anyone is doing the dividing, it would be me giving money to you, not the other way around. Don't you get it? Is that so? Well, that doesn't matter. Let's change the document to reflect mutual renunciation of property rights and make it a public document, I retorted stubbornly. Afterward, John redid the document on his computer, deciding to make it a public document. However, it would be some time before we could submit it. I decided to pack my things and leave the house for the moment. As I was leaving, he scorned me until the end. You are poor. I thought about throwing away your belongings while you were on your trip, but you barely had anything, always wearing the same clothes, typical of the poor. The reason my belongings were few at that time was deliberate, part of my plan. The only unexpected thing was John changing the locks without my knowledge. A few days later, as expected, a panicked John called me. Karen, what have you done? What do you mean? I haven't done anything. Why are you panicking? I have a lot of questions. First, I was told to leave the apartment. Oh, you were still living there? That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing. Trespassing? But it's my house. Are you okay? Did you forget that was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally you can't live there anymore. That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know. I'm not the one who should be accused of doing things on my own. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks of a rental apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want. Didn't you listen? It was my leased apartment. Even if you were the leaseholder, the owner is the apartment manager. You can't change the locks without informing them. Is that so? Also, I terminated the lease while you changed the locks. I was allowed to live there until this month. I was planning to return, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be criminal damage. Wait, why did you terminate it so early? Criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now? I'm too scared to open it. But I calmly replied, so the police did come. Don't worry. It's probably not for trespassing or criminal damage. It's better to talk to them. Why do I have to talk to the police? I know about the police because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It seems like you've committed crimes like forgery and fraudulent use of a private document. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only with mutual agreement and personal signatures. Since John forged my signature and the witness, it's obvious that it's a crime. But he seemed unaware of his guilt. I continued pressing further. So the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage with Susan can't happen either. How do you know about Susan? Did you think I knew nothing? I had a private detective agency thoroughly investigate your affair with Susan. It was a busy time at work, and coordinating with the agency was tough. Plus, you even held a grand wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. Are you okay? Your business trip was a lie? Yes, I took leave from work, despite being busy to do some research and prepare documents. I knew about you bringing Susan home. It would have been impossible to gather this evidence while working. After I revealed everything, John was speechless and seemed quite downcast even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me. "Please don't tell Susan I'm divorced." "Why would I? There's no such fact to tell." "Really? Thank you." "Are you misunderstanding something? When did you become divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid, remember? So legally, you're still my husband, not divorced." "What? So, since you committed adultery while legally my husband, Susan needs to pay compensation. I sent the demand for reparation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? I can't withdraw the claim at this point." I already knew Susan believed John was single, but I deliberately sent the reparation demand. Susan hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy. I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Susan's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it. He then hung up. He probably went straight to Susan's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be futile because the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan only. Even if he waited for the postman, he couldn't receive it. A few hours later, a dispirited John called me. According to him, there was an incident when the postman arrived. "Finally, I'll take that envelope." "Who are you? You don't live here, right?" "I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail." "I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Susan only." "What? Give it to me." "Absolutely not. If you're so eager, ask Susan for permission." "What's going on here?" "Oh, John, what's all this noise? What's happening?" "Susan, this is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. Now I'll be on my way." "What's this? A demand for reparation? John, you were married. What's going on here?" "Sorry, it's just she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it secret." "But it's strange, isn't it? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for reparation. If you were divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any problem, right?" "Well, my ex-wife is crazy. Maybe she's demanding reparation out of spite." "Because I got married." That was the excuse John gave, but such a lie was quickly exposed. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information, so Susan called me directly. During that call, I told her about the affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had a wedding ceremony while he was still married to me. Although they had a wedding ceremony, they hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. John wanted to submit it on a good luck day, so it was still pending. He probably delayed submitting the marriage registration due to uncertainty about whether the divorce was finalized. After being exposed, John fled from Susan's house and shamelessly contacted me again. I still had something to tell him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, John said, "Karen, please withdraw the reparation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and officially divorced now. I can apologize to Susan for being secretly divorced and maybe cover it up." "You think I'm desperate to stay married to you? I was going to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay reparation." "Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of the poor. You have such a poor heart." "You're talking nonsense. Depending on my answer, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce. If I say no, you can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Susan and your marital status will be exposed." "Fine. I'll pay the reparation. Just divorce me now." "Sign here then." "About property division." "Property division? How much more do you want to take from me?" "Reparation should be enough." "Remember, we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official." "All right. You're not as bad as I thought. Thank you." We then went to a public notary, made a public document for reparation and property division, and then to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with John. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, do you even have assets? After paying me reparation, Susan will also claim damages. She mentioned charging you for the wedding expenses. That's impossible. I'm marrying Susan. She can't claim that. We're divorced now, so there should be no problem. Still living in a fantasy. You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still married. You think Susan still believes you? Marriage fraud? That's ridiculous. Susan will believe me. Believe that if you want. I heard from Susan directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them. You knew about that? I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What are you talking about, poor woman? Your family is poor, and you only make $15,000 a year. Right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $20,000. You don't have any property. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary is indeed $15,000, but you know I work for a foreign company, right? It seems you have no interest in me, but I became a director of the American branch. It's not $15,000 per year, but per month. $155,000 per month. So that's an annual income of $860,000. $860,000? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount since our marriage. So, I could have received half of that in the property division. You were my destiny after all. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, you think I'd gladly undo the divorce? If you have that much money, you don't need to claim reparation, right? It's just a small amount for you. He who laughs at 1 cent will weep for 1 cent. This reparation is for the mental anguish you caused me. I'd like to claim more, honestly. And since we've made it official, make sure to pay it even in installments. I'll be penniless. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your belongings should have been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved most of them. Were you that indifferent to me? I can't have so little, so I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. It's only right to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said, "Don't ever step over our threshold again." So you have nowhere to go. He collapsed, and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he went back to the apartment. He sat there aimlessly in the empty apartment until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. I'm not sure if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or for the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After talking with me and learning about Susan, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Susan's family came first. They went to Susan's house to apologize, kneeling in front of her family. They settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even paying for the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing they didn't. So I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. John offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think everything could be solved with money. I wanted him to be convicted and understand the gravity of his actions. Even if it cost time and money, I left everything to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Even though it took time, John was exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud at his company. He couldn't stay there anymore. After being detained by the police and subsequently absent without leave, he was eventually fired. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him with no income. I thought his parents wouldn't abandon him, but they were stricter than I expected. They paid my reparation and Susan's compensation, planning to make him work like a horse until he repaid everything. He lived in a shed-like place with no electricity, receiving only $5 per day for food, deducted from his salary. They planned to disown and kick him out once he's repaid everything. A harsh fate. After years of hard work, I was offered a position at the head office abroad, so I moved overseas after the divorce was finalized. I worried John might come to me for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad alleviated those concerns. I thought work would be my partner for a while, but soon I found a new relationship. I'm now dating a foreign executive at our head office, and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I told him everything about my past and my ex-husband, and he's understanding. I'll take maternity leave and plan to return to work later, supported by him. He's enthusiastic about taking paternity leave and co-parenting, showing a different cultural perspective. After being tormented by my ex-husband, I finally feel I'm grasping true happiness and confidence in building the happy family I always dreamed of. Many suffer due to selfish spouses. While divorce isn't always the right choice, enduring in silence isn't a virtue. It's important to know that honest discussions can lead to resolutions, and sometimes divorce is a necessary option.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. "Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us." "The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.